Welcome to my video on surface area of cylinders. So before I introduce the formula, I'm going to give you a little background of what the cylinder is made up of and where the formula comes from. Excuse me. So a cylinder is made by putting two circles. Okay, there's a circle on the top of the cylinder and the bottom, and a rectangle together. And think of it this way: if you've ever peeled a soup label off a can, if you unravel it, it's a rectangle. So to find the surface area of a cylinder, we work in two parts. Okay, this net shows there are two circles on a cylinder. Thus, we find the area of one circle, then multiply by 2, since there are two. So that's part one of the formula. So we got to find the area of one circle and multiply by 2 to account for both. Now moving right along here. So I just tell you here the area of two circles equals 2 pi r squared. So that means 2 times pi times radius squared. And the 2, remember, is from two circles, and the pi r squared is the formula for area of a circle. So now let's talk about the second part, which is the folded rectangle. To find the area of the folded rectangle, we need to know what the height is, and that will always be given, and the length around the circle, and this is what we will need to find. Remember, distance around a circle is known as circumference. Now you probably don't remember 2 pi r from 6th grade because it was probably presented as pi times d. But this is the same as pi times d, because if I double the radius, I get the diameter. So this is the same as pi times d, and I read it as 2 times pi times radius. So if you were thinking, oh, I learned the formula last year and it was pi times d, you are correct, but this also is another formula for representing circumference. So we multiply the circumference and the height to get the area of the rectangle, because remember, a rectangle is length times width. Well, in this case, our length is the circumference and our width is the height. So the area of the folded rectangle is 2 times pi times radius times height. So we combine these two parts together to get the total surface area of the cylinder. Because remember, when I find surface area, I take the areas of each part. So that's why I'm adding them together. So the first way is 2 times pi times radius times height plus 2 times pi times radius squared. Or the way you'll see it on formula sheets is 2 times pi times radius squared plus 2 times pi times radius times height. Now it doesn't matter which one I use. Does anyone know why these two are the same? Because all I did was change the order of this and this to get this. Look, 2 pi r squared was at the end, now it's in the beginning. 2 pi r h was in the beginning, now it's at the end. Do you remember what property I use? Commutative of addition, because there's an addition sign between the two parts that I was moving. Okay, let's try some examples. So now we know where the formula comes from. So it says find the surface area of each cylinder, and what we're going to do is we're going to round our answer to the nearest tenth, because I want to practice doing that. They won't always ask you to round to the nearest tenth, but when they do, we need to be ready for that. So halfway across the circle is called the radius, so I know that this 3 is r. And this is how tall the cylinder is, so we're going to call this the height. So step 2 is to write the formula. So SA equals 2 times pi times radius squared. plus 2 times pi times radius times height. Now remember, this part right here are the two circles, and this part right here is the rectangle. Okay? So now we're going to bring down the 2. We're going to replace pi with 3.14. And we're going to take out the radius and put what? 3 squared. And we're going to box it in. Plus, bring down the 2, times what's pi? 3.14. Times what's the radius? 3. And what's the height? 24. So box it in. Now, I'm not going to make you type this in right now, but I'm going to tell you how to type it in. So if you were typing this into your calculator, you would type in 2 times 3.14 times 3, hit the x squared button, and if you don't hit equals after you hit the x squared button, then it's going to tell you what 3 squared is, which is 9. So if you ever get something on your calculator that goes, oh, that doesn't look right, then just remember to hit equals after. So I type this in, I remember to hit equals, and I get 56.52, or 56 and 52 hundredths. Plus, now this is pretty straightforward to type in 2 times 3.14 times 3 times 24, and I get 452 and 16 hundredths. Next step is to add these two parts up, and I get 508 and 68 hundredths. Now I'm going to show you how to round in case it ever asks you to round to the nearest tenth. So underline the tens place and look to the right. If it's 5 or above, give it a shove. If it's 4 below, let it go. So since it's an 8, we're going to give it a shove to a 7. Now don't forget your label, feet. What for area? Do you remember the exponent? 2. And we call that feet squared. Now, just a reminder for those of you who don't have the x squared button at home, when you type this part in, you would type in 2 times 3.14 times 3 times 3. Because remember, when you square something, it means to multiply by itself. So you would just type in 3 times 3 instead of hitting the x squared button. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Okay, it's tipped upside down, but I'm still looking for the radius, and the radius will always be drawn halfway across the circle, or if it's drawn all the way across, then it's the diameter. So I locate halfway across here, so this is going to be the radius. And if I tip this back up, okay, it's tipped over right now, but if I tipped it back up, then you would be able to clearly see that this is the height. Okay, so just look at it sideways, and you can tell that it's the height. Okay, first step after you label, or actually the second step after you label is to write the formula. 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. Okay, bring down the 2. Replace pi with 3.14. Replace the radius with 4.3 and put squared. Box this in because we're going to multiply that part first. Plus 2 times 3.14 times the radius, which is 4.3, times the height, which is 12. Box it in. Okay, now I would type this into my calculator. 2 times 3.14 times 4.3, and I would hit the x squared button, and my calculator says 116 and 1,172 10,000ths. Plus, this is straightforward, so I would just type it in and get 324 and 48 thousandths. Add it all up, and I get 440 and 1,652 10,000ths. Now, if it didn't tell me to round, I would be okay. But if it told me to round to the nearest tenth, I'm going to underline the tenths place and look to the right. And it's 5 or above, so I'm going to give it a shove to 440.2 centimeters squared. Now, if it asked me to round for the nearest tenth, and I didn't have a number in the tenths place, then I would just leave the number as is. The only time you need to round when it says to round to the nearest tenth is if you have more numbers after the tenths place. And look here, I have 3 numbers after the tenths place. Okay, so let's look at the last one. Ooh, it goes all the way across. So this isn't my radius. What is this? My diameter. So I got to write what the radius is so I don't get confused. So what's half of 10? Or 10 divided by 2? 5. What's the height? 8. So label that H. Okay, write the formula. SA equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi RH. Okay, bring down the 2. Take out the pi and put 3.14. Take out the radius, or r, and put 5 squared. Box it in. Bring down the 2. Take out pi. Take out the radius and put 5. And take out the height and put 8. Box it in. Now, type this in, and I've already typed it in, so it's 157 plus 251.2. Now, before I go any further, notice, even though we were rounded to the nearest tenth, we never rounded until we got to our final answer. So when you get the area of the circle and the area of the rectangle, don't round that, okay? We're going to add it together, then round my final answer. So we're going to add this together. It's 408.2. Now, do I have any numbers after the tenths place? No. So guess what? This is already good to go. So I don't have to do any rounding here. So I slap on the label, inches squared, circle my answer. And that concludes our notes on surface area of the cylinder. I hope you have a great day.